Good morning. It's Monday, April the 27th, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. I'm Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, because I don't take my cues from the left. I will not pretend to be neutral. I will not simply give you the facts and let you decide. I will not try to get in your psyche. I am partisan, and I'm here to convince and persuade. I created this podcast to answer the question most asked by conservatives, namely, what can I do? My podcast is short, about 5 to 10 minutes long, because shorter podcasts are easier to download and listen to, and shorter podcasts force me to get to the point. I've been listening to conservative talk radio since 1989. I've grown up in a socialist household, and I've seen the destructive effects of socialism up close and personal. My podcast is made available through Spreaker and can be heard on iTunes, Spotify, Google, and YouTube. Today, what can I do? And the quote of the day and Potpourri, all that when I come back. So, thank you very much. And what can I do? First thing you have to do is analyze what you have been doing. What have you been doing to fight socialism? Has it been effective or has it not? Second thing, don't spread the disease. Don't give in to the pressure to prove a negative. Mind your own business. Listen and read carefully. Criticize. Trust yourself. Be realistic. Learn to love the concept and abstraction. And don't be reactionary. Next up, the quote of the day. Thank you very much. The quote of the day comes from The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Quote, the argument from intimidation, relies not on what is said, but how it is said, not on content, but tone of voice. The tone is usually one of scornful or belligerent incredulity. That is accompanied by raised eyebrows, wide-eyed stares, shrugs, grunts, snickers, and the entire arsenal of nonverbal signals, communicating ominous innuendos and emotional vibrations of a single kind. Disapproval. Unquote. Next up, Potpourri. Thank you very much. The following are unconnected observations that are usually made while I'm drinking coffee and listening to Hugh Hewitt. Local news, not the national news. Where should you get your news? It's to answer that question. Because the lefties, if you you say, well, I don't watch CNN, I don't deal with ABC News, then they are going to ask you, where do you get your news? And the implication is that if you don't get any news, you don't tune into the news, there's something wrong with you. Well, the way to answer that properly is to say, I listen to the local, or watch the local news, or get as local of a paper as you possibly can. Skip the LA Times, the New York Times, get a hometown newspaper, because those journalists, those news people are generally acting in good faith. They're not trying to sell you on any particular political program. So local news, not national news. The right loses in unexpected ways. In Los Angeles, the mayor is celebrating the creation of new homeless shelters. Not only is money required to create these shelters, but lots of future funds are going to be needed to keep them running. Tax hikes in the offing. So you're losing here because you're creating homeless shelters when that's not the problem here. The problem isn't the homeless. The problem is for property owners. How do you maintain respect for property rights? Because that's what the issue is, that the homeless are now camping in places that they shouldn't be camping, whether it's public spaces or private spaces, and the property rights are being ignored. And this is being shaped as a homelessness problem. And the way to solve the homelessness problem, of course, is using public funds to create public housing for these homeless individuals. The problem is not only are we going to go ahead and spend money today for it, but we are very likely to be asked to give more money in the future because the politicians are going to come to us and say, we're running out of money and we have to fund these homelessness shelters. So we lose twice. We lose because we haven't bothered to properly define the problem, and then we lose because of that, not only with having to spend unneeded or unnecessary tax funds now, but also in the future. Let's see. We're not in this together. You hear this all the time. Every day I hear it on the radio. We're in this together. We're in this together. No, we're not. You're not in it with me. I'm not in it with you. We don't live in the same house. You don't pay my rent. I don't pay your groceries. We are in this joint and severally, but not together. Another left-wing attempt to get us to think as a collective or view ourselves as a collective. And they do this because they know if they can dominate the culture, they can dominate our politics, and then thereby, end up running the country, turning into Venezuela or Europe or whatever model they care to turn it into. The issue about the relief package being derailed by the Democrats is justice. Are the Democrats going to get away with this? They derailed the package. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer went over, and there's a package that had already been agreed to. Everybody had hashed everything out in the Senate, and then all of a sudden Nancy Pelosi comes over and spoils the party. And so the question is she going to get away with it? Is there going to be any comeuppance for Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi? And the answer is no, obviously not at this particular point. This is, again, another fault of the Republicans where they don't have any stones to do it. Now, I believe, and every time you see something going on in Washington, Sacramento, or anywhere else politically, you immediately have to consider and eliminate, first and foremost, political theater. I can't eliminate political theater from this. And as a matter of fact, from looking at the situation as it is now, I'm assuming that that's exactly what occurred. That Mitch McConnell got together with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and they planned this whole thing out. They orchestrated or choreographed this whole little kabuki theater, and to do it in order to get votes and, perhaps most importantly, for fundraising purposes. So, don't listen to the people who are telling you to be nonpartisan. Politics is always partisan. The people who tell you to act nonpartisan just want you to drop your guard. Okay, you can be bipartisan, where everybody sort of gets a little of what they want, but nonpartisan is ridiculous. Don't pay attention to that. Washington, D.C. is nothing but partisanship. So are all the state capitals. Metaphysical law number 8. There are some things that are impossible. We are a culture now of possibility thinkers, which is crap. So it puts undue psychological strain and pressure on people because there's no longer the out of saying, I can't do this because it's impossible. The question is, get it done and find a way. And if you can't find a way, then I'm going to find somebody else that can find a way. An example of this, I worked at the City of El Monte Treasurer's office, and the treasurer was an elected position, and the treasurer was a rather unreasonable person, a lefty, a hardcore lefty. One of the things the Treasury Department did is issue stickers to be placed on vehicles that are doing business in the city of El Monte, and these stickers change colors every year. So she asked me to come up with a color for the coming year. And so every time I would come up with a color, she didn't like it. Then when I suggested polka dots, no, that's no good. Stripes, that's no good. It seemed to me as though what she was really looking for me to do was come up with a color that hadn't been invented or described yet, i.e., come up with the impossible. And in so doing, she ends up frustrating people and making them, and wasting their time and wasting taxpayer money, after all. Glenn Beck used the term different standards when referring to a TV show that used objectionable language. No, there are the same standards for everybody. Bad language is bad language, period. If I was President Trump, I would chew out the pundits Rush Limbaugh on down that, quote, defend, unquote, him from arbitrary statements and make him look bad in the process. They try to defend him from arbitrary claims. And anytime you try to defend yourself from an arbitrary claim, you do nothing but make yourself look worse. So, if you were being called a fish, somebody walked up to you or you heard on the radio that you were being called a fish, or let's use Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh's a fish. And not a racist, not a homophobe, he's a fish. And what would you expect Rush Limbaugh to do about that? Would you expect him to defend himself? No, I'm not a fish. I've never been a fish. I don't even go fishing. As a matter of fact, I don't eat fish because I hate fish. Would you expect that? No. You would expect that he would say pretty much nothing other than, what the hell are they talking about? That's the kind of response you have to give when the left comes at you with the homophobe, etc. kinds of arbitrary allegations. What are you talking about? And move on. Or make the statement that it is an arbitrary claim, so I get to go ahead and ignore it and walk away from it. But if you fight it, if you try to prove a negative, that's one of the ways they get you to prove a negative is by making an arbitrary claim, then you end up making yourself look guilty, not innocent. And thank you very much, and back in a minute. Thank you. Who is a true conservative? He's a person that has the courage of his convictions and is confident in what he knows. He's the person that understands that cultural conservatism is more important than political conservatism. He's not selfish, but minds his own business. He acts like an adult. He's patriotic and uses common sense. He expresses what he knows and does so with certainty. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid of learning or correcting his mistakes. He's a normal American, and he's better than the socialist, a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that. If you don't know with every fiber of your being that being a true conservative is best, then you're wasting your time. That brings me to the end of another episode of The Drill. Remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win. Think about it.